I would like to start by explaining this combination, which might seem strange. I've been working in the well-being sector for a long time, and sometimes I get bored of this narrative that I think is maybe too sweet. I don't like it. So I wanted to invite Alfredo because he's well known for being very to the point, and he always says what he thinks. And of course, he's a manager of a with a very important sense of business. And so my perspective in this fireside chat is very clear, very honest, and business oriented. We want to talk about how competitive the job market is. So, where I want to start is here. The market is very competitive. Companies are ambitious and they want to win, but you can only win if you're a star, a superstar, if you have value. And I think that's even more so today. I truly believe that you have to understand the importance of well-being and attracting real talent so that you can be a true leader. Of course, Alfredo has said this to me many times before. He's asked me what well-being means and what the definition for well-being is. So, what does that mean in the professional world? What are we talking about when we say well-being? Especially if we want to consider well-being for those who are very high level. Maybe let's start there. What do you think well-being is, Alfredo, and as a leader?
Allora, il well-being è
So, first of all, well being is making sure that employees find themselves in an environment that functions according to merit. We can say whatever we want about all the aspects described as well-being according to scientific literature. But the truth is that if you work in a company that doesn't acknowledge the merit, well, this makes you feel frustrated. Every talent feels frustrated. So if you want to hire a talent, if you want to hire a skilled person, you need to make sure that your company works according to to merit. Back in the times of Fiat Chrysler, we had this sentence: mediocrity doesn't worth the trip. If you think about it, mediocrity doesn't worth the trip. If you think about it, this choice of being mediocre has the same cost of being a competitive and meritocratic company. It is up to you as an individual deciding whether you are at ease in a place, in a company that is not meritocratic. So in my opinion, well-being depends on the way you maintain a meritocratic environment.
Sportiva. So if we go back to sports and sports metaphors, which I love and I think you do too, we can talk about winning teams that attract the best players, the best talents, and can win matches in very competitive markets. One of the pillars is what we're talking about today. So leadership. Of course, 75 or 78% of people leaves their jobs because they don't get on well with their manager or their so-called leader at the time. We can also say that the topic of leadership is very important, and the guests that will come after us will discuss this too. Being a leader is very difficult. How can you be a leader and ensure that people have the well-being and the circumstances that they need? Of course, how has that changed? And You've had a long history in leadership, and I think that's important.
Up until some years ago, leaders were considered as number 10 in football teams. So you were a leader only if you were born a leader with the characteristics of a leader. But this is only partially true, because you can also become a leader. You can also become a leader. You need to challenge yourself every day. You need to question yourself every day. And you also need to count on good masters, good professors. But you don't necessarily have to be born as a leader. And even if you were born as a leader, you can never think that that innate characteristic is enough, because if you think so, you will lag behind, because companies, markets, and people, well, they evolve. Everything evolves. And you, as a leader, always need to anticipate this change. Otherwise, your leadership style will become old and obsolete. Today's leadership models are different from the ones we remember from the 80s or the 90s, when I started to work. If you are still a leader today, that's because you managed to interpret the change.
What types of leaders are you looking for? What type of an expansion are you planning? What are you doing in Europe?
One of the things I was most fascinated by BYD is that they are a giant in China. They have billions of turnover. They have millions of employees, many more than Stellantis or Volkswagen. But in Europe, BYD was just a startup. So when I was asked to deal with the development and the European market, the first thing I decided to do was creating the right teams in the different countries. We are now hiring people at a very high pace, 60 to 70 people per month. We are hiring a lot for the commercial area of the company. And in 8 months' time, we are going to hire 8,000 people in Hungary for the first production plant. European production plant, obviously. So I'm doing the most enjoyable things of a leader, which is building a team. Building a team gives you rights and obligations. The right to decide who you want to work with. So I'm addressing people, I'm addressing new people in the company with a very clear message. For instance, a topic that is often faced in our meeting is that in our work contract, smart working is not possible, okay? I hate people who work in a jumpsuit from home. So these people that are fond of smart working can go to another company. I always repeat that our company promotes work-life balance, but if you need to deliver a result, there is no Sunday, there is no Saturday, you work all the time. And the last day of the month, when you put a plate on the card, people need to work until midnight. If you don't want to do so, you go somewhere else. You go to another company. So guys, we need to be clear about that. If BYD has dramatically changed. 4 years ago, they sold 400,000 cars, and last year they sold 4 million cars. So they were nobody. They were anonymous as a company, and they are now a huge company because they've been working on Saturdays and on Sundays. But when you go to visit a company in BYD in China, there is a requirement that all BYD factories need to have a sports center, a sports facility, because employees need to make sport.
Totale.
Do they use that?
Yes, they do use this sports facility, and they use them so much that when I went to visit one of these sports facilities for the 30th anniversary, there were so many people sitting there watching games. and all the divisions of the group of BYD, well, they ran through the pitch because those were the Olympic Games of the company.
È stata una roba
They managed to make you wear a tracksuit?
che non finisse da nessuna parte.
Yes, they managed, so they forced me to wear a jumpsuit. And at the end of the day, they asked us to go down to the pitch and run 100 meters. It was a competition. All people from BYD needed to be there, from the founder to the top management, because they wanted to spread out a message. Exactly, they wanted people to walk the talk. Competition is led by rules setters. Beyond the scenographic aspect of these Olympic Games inside BYD, this is one of the lessons I learned. I'm old enough in this job. I have enough seniority in this job, but something like this had never happened to me before BYD. And from the point of view of a manager, this was extremely interesting. I mean, the fact that you know where the example you give is arriving to.
This is very interesting, and it fascinated me when you told me about it before. But if we go back to the sports metaphor, if you want a winning team, of course, you need a coach. So leadership, like we said, I like to talk about mindful leadership. So a person who has a certain type of presence, of vision, of care for other people, and who are very open with their emotional well-being and those of others. So that's important. But then you have to have a well-oiled and well-trained team. If you have people who are physically not doing well or mentally not doing well, that's at the basis of everything, and you're already at a bad start. So I think that an important thing for all companies to consider would be training. But is training only about hard skills that the company needs? And I do believe that that's important, but is it also important to train people on how to consider well-being, mental health, and physical well-being? What do you think? Is that a pillar?
Yes, this is extremely true. I'm in a board of an American company, a US company. Unfortunately, we know that overweight persons are many, and the problem is so tragic over there, much more than here. Well, one month ago, we decided in the board to implement a coaching program for people with obesity, to explain them how to be in a good shape, in a better shape, maybe using a diet, doing sport, exercise, physical activity. So we changed the headquarters, we went somewhere else, and inside the headquarters we have built a gym with a nutritionist, a dietist.
You were saying earlier that if you need to deliver something, you'll do it no matter what. It doesn't matter if you have to work overnight or on the weekend. And of course, that could be fine, but there needs to be time to recover, because otherwise we risk burning out. So of course, if you get in the loop of having to deliver results, that you get sucked in, and that's difficult. So what's the attitude there? What's the balance between training and cultivating your health and your mind? You have to find room for training. And how do you balance that with results? How do you do that?
Well, I'll be frank, I've just slept a few hours. This is one of the few privileges I have. I do not have to sleep a lot.
Pixies does have sleep coaches, so don't listen to this.
Personale.
So I don't need to sleep a lot. But apart from my personal case, one of the top abilities for any coach, for any leader, is being able to interpret, to read the moments, the ups and downs of the life of an organization. And no doubt you have to be able to schedule those cool down moments in which people need to recover, in which people need to rest. Well, you also have to find a good balance between the cool down moment and the top performance moment. And these moments need to be, well, individuals need to rest on their own, and maybe some groups need a cool down moment on their own. You need to understand when someone needs a cool down moment, and favoring these moments inside an organization is important because you need to abandon the competitive dynamic of delivering and delivering every time, every month and every year. You also need to understand what the relational dynamic is, what is happening among people. You need to understand what is happening among people apart from performing well as a group of employees. You need to know if they get on well among each other.
You are preaching to the choir because in the Pixies team, we do think about this a lot, about locker room talk and sharing and how to really foster the team's well-being. And there's no results and no delivering that's too important for us to forget well-being, and everything for us is about team building.
Per rendere
In order to make all this clear to people who work with me, I have this message, and I usually tell that in all the companies I've been working, and I was in the top management, well, I have always organized a two-day rugby practice. You know, you can usually use a rugby as a metaphor for companies. It is the only sport in which, in order to move forward, you need to pass the ball behind. This means that if the rest of the team is not going with the player who has the ball, well, you go nowhere. You are fucked up. The second feature of rugby is the third half, the third time, let's say. When the game is over, the two teams need to meet. It is compulsory that they meet in a bar or in a pub to be together. So once the delivery moment, once the performance moment is over, they need to socialize, they need to be together. And I did so in the companies I've been working for as a manager. I wanted men and women to play together, to play rugby together, because mental mechanisms are the same in men and women. So this is what we understand by keeping balance between the cool down moment and the performance moment.
Alla fine lo sport.
That's interesting. I think that we can draw from a lot of sports metaphor, but then the practice of the sport really builds your attitude. So to wrap things up and move forward, we've talked about leadership and well-being. We've talked about the best in class and how to attract them. We said it's important to have a managerial team that rewards merit, because the best talent that don't want to work for companies that are not worth it. So they want to work for the right attitude, and but companies that have a certain set of procedures, so they create their own playing field. So in terms of these playing fields of the company and corporate setting and the meritocracy in all corporation, we've said that that should be the first driver to attract those who make a difference. Of course, you also have to have people who can deliver from maybe lower and more relaxed levels, but we're talking about the stars. So mindful leadership, that's number one. A field of play, that's important, and then a very American mindset to promote health and well-being. They do a lot in American companies. I don't know if they still do, but I know when I worked there, they had a strong focus on that. They also care about tending to their own orchard, and that's something that we should all do for the future. Young people are different than that. They require different things. They definitely want work-life balance. They want well-being ensured for them. They're not sure what well-being means for them, but they want it. So when we have such a fast-paced dynamic, how do you tend to your own lawn? How do you foster and build an attractive company that can attract that new generation of young people who, of course, has different drivers than we do. They want to work remotely.
Detto
I've always said this, that people must smell leadership. I've always believed in this. I don't know what happens with those CEOs who live in their apartments, beautiful apartments or beautiful offices that are filtered by their secretaries. Well, I've never trusted these CEOs because they need to be around. They need to experience the company. They need to go down to the workshop. They need to go down to talk to salespersons. But the most important thing is that you make things clear with people who work with you. Also in the low levels of the organization, you know, to help them understand what the values of the companies are. What you're saying is extremely important. Young people have dramatically changed, and then we need to make a difference about it. We need to explain a difference about it, but I will focus on that later on. The most important thing is explaining people to come to your company what your values are. You need to explain people who have who had just been hired. Why do I stress the absence of smart working in the contract? Because I don't want to delude anybody, okay? I don't think that smart working helps people grow as talents. So I do not want anybody working from home. Now, young persons having an inclination towards performance or not. Well, this gap is now becoming broader, larger. There are now people who go to attend particularly competitive universities. These people come to your company and they are hungry for success, so they are ready to bite and to open their way ahead of them. And on the other hand, there are other people who go to opposite schools, very different schools in which competitiveness and competition is not taught. So they arrive, they come to your company being demotivated. And this gap is becoming broader. No company can only hire hyper-competitive persons, okay? Please remember that any company, every company is like a pyramid. You need, and in a pyramid, in any army, you need marshals, you need generals, you need, well, any sort of degree in the hierarchy. You need a structured army, okay? So you need the leaders and the non-leaders. So there is a lack of consistency in university training. Universities are not always able to train people for the labor market, and we need to deal with that.
Quanta?
We only have 1.5 minutes left. I know that there's a lot left to discuss, and we could talk about these topics forever. So thank you. Alfredo will write the preface of a book that will be published and will include a number of quotes. It will be issued by the Sole 24 Ore. It will feature quotes by many people who practice leadership because the book addresses topics that we've discussed today. And the goal of this book is to showcase a number of different point of views. So that's a bit of a spoiler for you. But in wrapping up our talk, I would like to thank Fabrizio because he designed all these amazing things that we've talked about. And he can show you the QR code that you can scan if you want to keep up to date with what we're up to over the next few months with this book and all the topics about leadership and well-being that we've talked with Alfredo about. Do we need to say anything else?
Well, I'll just say that the book Tiziana wants to write, and I'll be honored to write the introduction to that book. Well, this book is not a recipe of elements that are necessary to be a good leader. It's not a to-do list to be a good leader. It's just a book that aims at providing suggestions. Obviously, any reading needs to be personalized. No book is going to teach you how to be a leader. You will learn how to be the leader only by practicing, only by working.
in base
That's so true, and it's important to provide context about where in their journey each company is. We have startups, we have more developed companies, so you'll see all of that in the book. Fabrizio, thank you.
disegnato noi, ma è anche disegnato.
You've designed our work, but other things as well.
Yes, we started this morning. There is a further talk after this. So this is full of insights. For any artist, this is a very amusing day. Thank you, with beautiful guests.
Thank you all.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you all. I would ask you to leave from that.